The 1970s was Europe's most dangerous decade for cinema. Behind velvet curtains, daring filmmakers created stories so shocking that governments tried to silence them. From Nazi horrors to surreal erotic nightmares, these films weren't just censored, they were forbidden, but bans only fueled their legend. Which titles were too disturbing for audiences to see? Let's uncover the truth. 1. Island of Death, 1976, Greece. When Island of Death premiered in Greece, it was immediately branded a cinematic disgrace. Audiences whispered about its unflinching depictions of depravity, while critics dismissed it as a grotesque stain on film culture. Yet within the underground world of cult cinema, it became notorious, an exploitation picture that dared to cross every boundary imaginable. The film followed a couple's descent into madness as they unleashed violence and humiliation upon anyone in their path. What set Island of Death apart was not just its shocking imagery, but the way it presented moral collapse as if it were inevitable, lurking in every idyllic landscape. Greek authorities banned the movie outright, calling it an insult to national culture. In the United Kingdom, it became part of the infamous video nasties list, its tapes seized from rental shops, turning it into contraband treasure for daring collectors. Behind the scenes, director Nikos Mastorakis claimed he only made the movie to compete with the success of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He admitted later that he wanted to push beyond even that film's limits, creating something so outrageous it couldn't be ignored. The result was an exploitation legend, reviled, yet impossible to forget. Though despised at its release, Island of Death grew into a cult classic. Its banishment only added fuel to its notoriety, ensuring that decades later it would be studied as a prime example of Europe's fearless and dangerous cinema. Deuxième Vase de Noces, 1974, Belgique. Few films remain as controversial as Vase de Noces, often referred to simply as the pig-farming movie. Though its reputation was more whispered rumor than mainstream knowledge, it became one of the most banned films of the decade. Critics couldn't even agree whether it was art house or pure exploitation. The story, a surreal, almost silent portrayal of a man's isolation on a farm and his disturbing attachment to animals, was so grotesque that screenings provoked walkouts. Australian censors banned the film repeatedly throughout the late 70s and 80s, citing obscenity laws. It was effectively erased from public availability, surviving only as a whispered myth in underground film circles. Director Thierry Zeno insisted his film was not exploitation, but a philosophical experiment on loneliness and alienation. He defended its disturbing imagery as metaphorical, suggesting the intent was symbolic rather than sensational. Yet audiences and censors alike rejected this justification. To them, the film represented cinema's darkest impulses, a transgression too severe to excuse. Bootleg VHS tapes circulated in Europe, each copy passed like forbidden knowledge. For some, it symbolized ultimate rebellion against censorship. For others, it was proof that art could cross a line so far it ceased to be defensible. Today, Vase de Noces is still banned in countries like Australia. Its shocking reputation continues to divide viewers. Is it unwatchable trash or a radical experiment in confronting human isolation? Perhaps it's both. Either way, it remains one of Europe's most infamous banned films. Third, Maladolescenza, 1977, Italy, Czech, West Germany. At first glance, Maladolescenza presented itself as an art house meditation on innocence, youth, and coming of age. But upon release, audiences and critics recoiled at what they saw on screen. To many, it was neither art nor romance. It was exploitation hiding behind pretension. The story follows teenagers living in an idyllic forest, exploring relationships and emotions. While intended as a poetic exploration of adolescence, the film quickly became infamous for its scandalous depiction of underage intimacy. In Italy, its release sparked public outrage, while in Germany it was met with bans and heavy censorship. The controversy grew so intense that decades later, a Dutch court classified it as child pornography, banning it outright. Behind the scenes, the filmmakers defended their work, claiming they wanted to present a naturalistic vision of adolescence in the European art house tradition. Yet the defense only deepened the scandal. Was it art pushing boundaries or exploitation crossing moral lines? Maladolescenza became one of the most divisive films of the 1970s, one that left scars on the reputations of those involved. Unlike many exploitation titles that thrived on their forbidden status, this film exists in a gray area. Some see it as misunderstood art, while most remember it only as an unforgivable step too far. Its ban cemented its legacy, not as a work to admire, but as a cautionary tale of how cinema can misjudge the line between provocation and exploitation. 4SS Pesset Experiment Camp, 1976, Italy. In the mid-1970s, Italy became ground zero for one of the most shocking subgenres in cinema, Nazi-ploitation. Among them, SS Experiment Camp stood out, and not in a good way. Critics denounced it as grotesque exploitation, while audiences either recoiled in disgust or whispered about its forbidden allure. Released in 1976, the film purported to show the horrors of a Nazi medical camp. But rather than presenting history with seriousness, it indulged in lurid imagery designed for shock. Its posters, depicting a naked woman strapped to a medical table, provoked immediate outrage. In the UK, the British Board of Film Classification refused to pass the film. It was later branded one of the most infamous video nasties during the moral panic of the 1980s, ensuring its underground circulation. Behind the scenes, the filmmakers claimed they wanted to dramatize the cruelty of the Nazi regime. Yet their defense rang hollow. What audiences saw felt closer to exploitation of history rather than illumination of it. Italy itself allowed the release, but other countries, including France, quickly moved to ban it. Ironically, the ban only increased curiosity. VHS bootlegs passed from collector to collector, creating an aura of danger around the film. Today, SS Experiment Camp is remembered not as historical commentary, but as a symbol of exploitation cinema's ability to outrage governments and lure audiences with its very prohibition. Its existence remains a troubling reminder. When cinema exploits real horrors for shock value, the line between remembrance and sensationalism can vanish entirely. 5. La Bestia in Calore, The Beast in Heat, 1977, Italy. If SS Experiment Camp provoked anger, La Bestia in Calore pushed outrage into overdrive. Released in 1977, it is often cited as one of the most notorious examples of exploitation gone too far. Marketed as another Nazi-ploitation horror, it combined sadism, violence, and grotesque imagery into a package that even hardened exploitation fans found unbearable. The story centered on a Nazi doctor who created a bestial soldier addicted to violence and depravity. What unfolded on screen was so shocking that even in Italy, where censorship was often more lenient, critics condemned it. Internationally, the movie was widely banned or censored, labeled as beyond taste. Behind the scenes, the filmmakers capitalized on shock marketing. Posters promised audiences the most depraved film they would ever see. This advertising strategy worked until governments intervened. In the UK, it joined the ranks of the video nasties, ensuring that owning a copy could lead to confiscation and fines. Despite its crude production values and exploitation tactics, the film lingered in memory precisely because of its ban. For some collectors, it became a badge of underground credibility, proof that they had something the law forbade. Today, La Bestia in Calore is rarely discussed outside cult horror circles, but its notoriety still lingers, a symbol of how far European exploitation cinema was willing to push boundaries and how far governments would go to stop it. 6. In the Realm of the Senses, L'Empire des Sens, 1976, France, Château, Japan. Unlike many titles on this list, In the Realm of the Senses was not a low-budget shocker, but an international art house film directed by Nagisa Oshima. Yet it faced bans across Europe that rivaled any exploitation movie. Why? Because it blurred the line between art and obscenity in ways no one had dared before. The story, based on a true event in the 1930s Japan, follows a couple's obsessive love affair spiraling into dangerous extremes. While Oshima insisted his film was a meditation on desire and destruction, the unsimulated intimacy shocked censors worldwide. In Japan, the film was censored with blank spaces where certain imagery was deemed illegal. In the United States, it was banned after its 1976 New York Film Festival screening. West Germany and Belgium outlawed it completely, with the Belgian ban lasting until the mid-1990s. Behind the scenes, Oshima fought fiercely for artistic freedom, declaring that no government should dictate where art could go. His battle turned In the Realm of the Senses into more than a film. It became a cultural flashpoint, raising questions about censorship, morality, and freedom of expression. Though controversial, the film achieved something few banned titles did: critical recognition. Decades later, it is studied in universities and screened at festivals, proof that cinema once deemed obscene can evolve into acknowledged art. Yet its banning is central to its legacy. It remains a reminder that art, when fearless enough, can terrify authority, and that suppression often ensures a film's immortality. 7. Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS, 1975, West Germany-Canada co-production, widely distributed in Europe. When Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS arrived on the exploitation circuit in 1975, audiences didn't know what to make of it. Was it history? Was it horror? Or was it something far more dangerous? What they saw was a fever dream of sadistic violence dressed in Nazi uniforms. Critics condemned it instantly, branding it tasteless trash. Yet underground audiences turned it into legend. The plot revolved around Ilsa, a sadistic camp commandant who conducted inhumane experiments and brutal punishments. It wasn't subtle, it wasn't respectful, it was pure exploitation, designed to shock, to sell tickets, and to scandalize. What made it infamous wasn't only its content, but its brazenness. Unlike other Nazi-themed shockers, Ilsa embraced its notoriety, marketing itself as the ultimate forbidden spectacle. Across Europe, censors reacted with fury. In West Germany, the birthplace of the horrors the film exploited, authorities banned the film outright, calling it an insult to history. The UK refused its classification, effectively banning it for decades. Even in countries that allowed its release, heavy cuts were enforced. Behind the scenes, the film was shot cheaply in Canada on leftover sets from the TV series Hogan's Heroes. Actress Diane Thorne, who played Ilsa, claimed she wanted to portray a strong female villain, a claim that did little to ease the controversy. Instead, she became forever linked to one of cinema's most notorious characters. Despite, or perhaps because of, its bans, Ilsa spawned sequels and imitators, creating an entire Nazi exploitation subgenre. Today, it is remembered not for quality, but for audacity. Its banning solidified its status as both a symbol of transgressive cinema and a cautionary tale about when shock overwhelms substance. 8. Emanuelle in America, 1977, Italy. The Black Emanuelle series became a sensation. In the 1970s Italy, mixing exotic adventures with provocative themes. But Emanuelle in America took the formula to extremes that landed it on banned lists worldwide. What began as an erotic travelogue spiraled into something darker, an exploitation film that pushed past boundaries most audiences weren't prepared to face. Starring Laura Gemser, the film followed the glamorous journalist Emanuelle as she uncovered shocking scandals among the wealthy elite. What elevated it from standard fare to notorious infamy were the scenes that blurred lines between fantasy and reality. Graphic depictions of underground depravity, including supposed snuff imagery, caused panic among censors. Italy allowed its release in a restricted format, but other countries, including the UK, quickly banned it outright. Behind the scenes, director Joe D'Amato admitted he wanted to outdo other filmmakers by presenting material so outrageous it would guarantee attention. His gamble worked. The bans ensured the film lived in whispered reputation long after its screenings ended. For decades, rumors spread that the film contained real footage of violence, myths that only added to its legend. Critics dismissed it as cynical trash, yet cult audiences devoured it, fascinated by its blend of glamour and horror. In the underground video markets of the 1980s, Emanuelle in America became a prized possession, proof that one had access to cinema the authorities didn't want you to see. Today, it stands as a lightning rod of controversy, a film remembered less for artistry than for the storm it unleashed. Its banning shows how exploitation cinema thrived on the very act of prohibition. 9. Don't Torture a Duckling, 1972, Italy. When acclaimed Italian director Lucio Fulci released Don't Torture a Duckling, he expected to be praised for crafting a thoughtful murder mystery with Gothic atmosphere. Instead, he found himself at the center of scandal. Far from being celebrated, the film was banned, censored, and vilified, especially by the Catholic Church. The story follows a rural village shaken by the murders of children, with suspects ranging from an outcast woman to a wandering priest. While the giallo genre was known for stylish violence, Fulci's film dared to critique deep-seated corruption and hypocrisy in small-town Italy. This, more than the violence itself, provoked outrage. Religious institutions condemned the film as blasphemous. Authorities pulled it from cinemas in southern Italy, fearing it insulted the church and painted rural citizens as backward. Behind the scenes, Fulci defended his work, claiming he intended to expose prejudice and superstition, not glorify them. Yet the damage was done. Censors demanded cuts, and bans spread across Europe. Ironically, the controversy overshadowed the film's artistry. Fulci's haunting imagery, rolling hills, decaying villages, and moments of quiet menace were ignored by critics too scandalized by its themes. Over time, however, its reputation shifted. What was once banned as blasphemous is now celebrated as one of Fulci's masterpieces, a giallo that dared to criticize not just individuals, but institutions. The ban, once a punishment, helped preserve its status as a brave, dangerous work of 1970s exploitation cinema. In the end, Don't Torture a Duckling proved that sometimes the films most feared by authorities are those that cut closest to uncomfortable truths. 10. Flesh for Frankenstein, 1973, Italy/France/USA co-production. Few films embodied the excesses of 1970s European exploitation quite like Paul Morrissey's Flesh for Frankenstein. Released in 1973, it was advertised as a shocking 3D spectacle, daring audiences to witness gore, decadence, and taboo-breaking imagery up close. The tagline promised thrills, but many countries delivered bans instead. The film, produced by Andy Warhol's Circle, reimagined Mary Shelley's tale with perverse humor and explicit violence. Its Count Frankenstein, played with unhinged flair by Udo Kier, wasn't the tormented genius of Gothic literature. He was a grotesque figure obsessed with building a new master race. In scene after scene, the film relished in outrageous splatter effects. It wasn't subtle, and it wasn't meant to be. When it reached European censors, the reaction was fierce. Italy, despite being its co-producer, demanded cuts. The UK delayed its release, and when it finally appeared, it was heavily edited and later caught up in the video nasties scare. Even in the US, the MPAA slapped it with an X rating, ensuring limited theatrical circulation. Behind the scenes, the production was chaotic but deliberate in its pursuit of provocation. Morrissey later admitted he wanted to satirize both horror films and fascist ideology through excess. But most critics dismissed the film as crude shock value. Its reputation was sealed as one of the most tasteless yet unforgettable horror experiences of its time. For fans of underground cinema, Flesh for Frankenstein became a badge of honor, an outrageous, banned masterpiece that symbolized 1970s exploitation's gleeful disregard for respectability. 11th House of Whipcord, 1974, United Kingdom. In 1974, British director Pete Walker released House of Whipcord, a grim tale of punishment and repression that immediately sparked outrage. On the surface, it was a horror thriller about young women imprisoned by a sadistic judge and his equally cruel partner. But beneath that lurid exterior, it carried a scathing critique of authoritarian morality. Audiences at the time didn't see the critique. They saw cruelty. The film depicted women lured into a private prison under the guise of reform, only to be subjected to psychological torment and degradation. Britain's Board of Film Classification initially balked at its sadism. Some territories banned it outright, calling it obscene. Others demanded severe cuts before allowing screenings. Behind the scenes, Walker defended his film as social commentary. He claimed he wanted to expose society's obsession with punishment and hypocrisy. Indeed, the imagery of judges, uniforms, and moral correction carried obvious satirical undertones. But exploitation audiences came for thrills, not lessons, and critics dismissed the film as tasteless provocation. Despite bans, House of Whipcord thrived in underground circles. Its very suppression fueled its reputation as something dangerous. Over time, it gained recognition as one of Pete Walker's defining works, an exploitation film that disguised political critique in lurid packaging. It remains a reminder that censorship often silences critique along with scandal, leaving audiences to wonder what was really being suppressed, the violence on screen or the truths it dared to hint at. 12. I Spit on Your Grave, 1978, France/USA distribution in Europe. Although American-made, I Spit on Your Grave found its infamy most sharply in Europe, where it was met with some of the harshest bans of the decade. Released in 1978, it became a lightning rod in the debate over violence, exploitation, and morality. The film told the story of a woman brutally attacked who then seeks violent revenge against her tormentors. It was raw, relentless, and deeply controversial. Critics called it misogynistic trash. Feminist groups in France and the UK condemned it for perpetuating violence against women. Governments went further. In the UK, it was banned outright by the BBFC and remained forbidden for decades. In Norway, Ireland, and several other European nations, it was blacklisted entirely. Behind the scenes, director Mir Zarchi defended his work, insisting it was a story about survival and empowerment. But audiences and authorities couldn't see past its graphic brutality. It became one of the most reviled films of the 1970s, while simultaneously turning into a cult sensation among those who sought it out precisely because it was forbidden. On VHS, it became a prized video nasty, circulated secretly across Europe. For critics, it represented everything wrong with exploitation cinema. For defenders, it was a brutal but honest depiction of vengeance. To this day, I Spit on Your Grave divides audiences. Was it banned because it degraded women, or because it forced society to confront uncomfortable realities about violence? Its place in European exploitation history lies at that intersection of outrage, prohibition, and enduring fascination. 13. Man from the Deep River, 1972, Italy. Long before Cannibal Holocaust made headlines, Man from the Deep River introduced audiences to a subgenre that would become one of the most controversial in exploitation history: Italian cannibal films. Released in 1972, this picture by Umberto Lenzi was inspired by westerns and jungle adventures, but its shocking imagery ensured it wouldn't be remembered as mere entertainment. The story followed a British photographer who becomes entangled with a remote Amazonian tribe, discovering their customs of ritual violence and cannibalism. While some saw it as an anthropological adventure, others recoiled at its unapologetic brutality. Scenes of animal slaughter and tribal rituals blurred the line between fiction and reality. European censors responded with alarm. In the UK, it faced outright bans. Other nations required severe cuts. Even in Italy, the film was accused of sensationalism, yet the controversy only amplified its appeal, inspiring a cycle of cannibal-themed films throughout the 1970s and early 80s. Behind the scenes, Lenzi insisted he wanted to explore cultural clashes and the savagery of civilization versus nature. But his film's lurid marketing made clear its real intent: shock and exploitation. Its banning didn't erase it. It made it the progenitor of a whole movement. Man from the Deep River remains a disturbing landmark, the spark that lit one of cinema's darkest, most banned genres. 14. Caligula, 1979, Italy-USA co-production. At its premiere, Caligula was expected to be a bold historical epic. With a cast including Malcolm McDowell, Peter O'Toole, and Helen Mirren, and a script by celebrated novelist Gore Vidal, it promised prestige. Instead, it became one of the most scandalous films of the decade, banned, censored, and reviled across Europe. The film chronicled the rise and fall of the infamous Roman Emperor Caligula, but instead of a stately drama, audiences found themselves immersed in orgiastic spectacles of violence, betrayal, and decadence. Produced by Bob Guccione, founder of Penthouse magazine, the movie was heavily re-edited to include scenes of shocking explicitness. Cast members later claimed they were unaware of the film's final direction. Censors across Europe responded with bans. In Britain, the film was refused classification for decades. In France and Germany, it was released only in cut versions. Italy disowned the production, despite its Roman setting. Critics were horrified, with Roger Ebert calling it sickening, depressing trash. Behind the scenes, lawsuits erupted between Vidal, Guccione, and director Tinto Brass. What was meant to be a bold epic turned into a scandalous debacle. Yet, ironically, the bans and controversy transformed Caligula into one of the most famous, forbidden films ever made. Its legacy endures as a cautionary tale of how ambition, exploitation, and scandal can collide, creating not art, but infamy. 15. Cannibal Holocaust, 1979, Italy. No list of banned European exploitation films could end with anything other than Cannibal Holocaust. Released in 1979, it remains perhaps the most notorious film of the entire exploitation era, so controversial that its director was arrested upon release. The film, presented as a found-footage documentary, told the story of a film crew who disappear in the Amazon, only for their reels to reveal horrific scenes of violence and cannibalism. Audiences were stunned not only by its savagery, but by how real it appeared. Italian authorities were convinced the film depicted genuine murder. Director Ruggero Deodato was charged with obscenity and suspected of homicide. He was forced to bring his cast to court to prove they were still alive. Even then, the movie was banned in Italy, the UK, and numerous other countries. Its graphic scenes of animal cruelty in particular ensured decades-long prohibitions. Behind the scenes, Deodato claimed his intention was to criticize Western media's exploitation of tragedy. But critics dismissed this as hollow justification. The controversy became global, with Cannibal Holocaust earning the title of the most banned film of all time. Despite, or perhaps because of, its bans, the film achieved legendary cult status. It remains a touchstone in discussions of censorship, morality, and the extremes of cinematic shock. Cannibal Holocaust closed the decade with a warning. Sometimes, cinema can push so far past limits that the law itself steps in. The 1970s proved that cinema could be more dangerous than governments imagined. Each of these banned films left scars on history, whether through outrage, censorship, or cult fascination. Which of these infamous titles do you think deserved suppression, and which were unfairly silenced? Like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below.